We have a great episode for you tonight as we talk with Timothy P. Brown about a high school team from early 1900s that produced many big stars of football. It's all coming up in a moment with Tim, so stay tuned.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another Tuesday. It's FootballArchaeology.com day with Timothy P. Brown of that great site, visiting us once more to tell us about some great history of football. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Good to see you, and I hope the topic that we're talking about doesn't cause any division between you and I. But keep your head on a swivel, buddy.
Right. I doubt it's going to cause division, but that's a great segue coming into it. But this is a great piece of history that I really enjoyed when you wrote your recent tidbit titled 1904 Chicago North Division High Stars. And I really didn't know what to expect going into it when I read that title not too long ago. But boy, it was a good one, and talking about a real great legend of the game.
Yeah. Well, before getting into the story itself, I did want to acknowledge the start of the college football season. I am wearing a Wisconsin Badger shirt. You know, probably, I would say most people would acknowledge them as the finest Division I football team in the land.
They in D1 now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they still are.
Okay.
They still are.
Okay.
It's been a little questionable of late, but we're coming back this year. And then we will be talking about the University of Chicago, so that's my lid there. So this story is about the 1904 North Division High School, Chicago North Division High School football team. And like I grew up in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee had North Division and they had South Division High School. They didn't have East or West. You know, down in Chicago, they had North Division and they had South Division. They had boys, I forget, there's some name for it, but anyways, you know, some of the names of the old high schools I think are just kind of cool. Like Milwaukee had Boys Tech, which was like the manual arts kind of school, right? You know, taught the pattern makers and whatever else, you know. So anyways, good old industrial, you know, kind of education. So anyways, so, you know, so the Chicago high school put out some really talented teams, you know, back at just after turn of the century. And North Division, the team, we're going to talk about the 1904 team, but the 1903 team, you know, had the championship of the Chicago area and, you know, maybe the state of Illinois, who knows what, you know, they laid claim to. But they went out to Brooklyn and played Brooklyn Boys High School and beat them 75-0. So they were probably, and they were like the champs of New York City. So they were probably a pretty good team. And then they had a couple of kids who graduated. One of them ended up, I think he was an All-American, a guy named DeTrey, who played at Chicago. And then a guy, Graham, who was a tackle, you know, at Michigan. So, and, you know, I'm sure they had some other guys. But the 1904 team was also really talented. They ended up early in the season. You know, this is back. It was right at the end when college teams stopped playing high schools. But this year, you know, this is one of those years where they were still doing that as like the early season. They kind of consider them practice games, but they show up on, you know, the team records, the official records. But just to give you a sense of, you know, sometimes there wasn't, like if you had a really well-coached high school team, and especially like the prep schools out east where they kind of recruited guys, and, you know, some of those those teams were every bit as good as a lot of college teams. And, you know, just more because of they were well schooled and some recruiting. But like the 1904 North Division team, they played Chicago. They played the University of Chicago at the start of the season. And Chicago was like 10-0-1 that year. And Chicago beat the high school team 18-0. the high school team then plays Purdue and loses 5-0. And then they beat Chicago's freshmen 6-0. So, I mean, they were pretty darn good, So anyways, and then part of the reason they were good is they had some really talented players. So number one, they had Walter Steffen, who was their quarterback. He almost didn't play for them that season because he tried to enroll after 3 years. He tried to enroll at Wisconsin, and the admissions office wouldn't let him in. He was up there practicing, living there. And then the admissions people said, no, you need another year of high school in order to come here. So he goes back and then plays the season with North Division. But he ended up going to Chicago then. He then did not go to Wisconsin. Goes to Chicago and is a first team All-American as a senior, playing under Stagg. And then he ends up longtime Carnegie Mellon coach and a judge in Chicago and blah, blah, blah. There's a tidbit out there about him too. So another guy that they had is Joe Papa, who nobody's heard of, but he was, he played offensive line for them, and he ended up coaching area high schools, Chicago area high schools, but he also coached DePaul. He coached both their academy or high school team and the university team. He also, during World War I, he coached Navy Pier, which I think went undefeated, and they tried to claim that they should have gone to the Rose Bowl instead of Great Lakes. But so he was, pretty talented coach at least.
Was Navy Pier the Navy Pier in Chicago?
Yes, yeah.
So wow, they had two naval academies that close to each other during the war, huh? Because Great Lakes is not far from Chicago.
Yeah, so Great Lakes is maybe 40 miles north of the city. It's almost to Wisconsin. But the Naval Pier was, I don't know, some kind of, some training facility, during the war. But the thing that he's most known for is he holds the patent for ropes. The little ropes that you run through.
Like the ladders.
Yeah, the ladder. Yeah.
Okay.
He holds, or he's dead now, but he's the guy who invented those and holds the patent for them.
No kidding.
And then they had a guy named Paul Dornblaser, who, again, he wasn't even like a big star on the team, but he was a lineman. He ends up at Montana, and he's a captain there. Then he ends up being, he's killed in France during World War I, serving with the Marines. So then Montana named their football stadium after him, and then their next football stadium they named after him, and now it's their track and field facility. But so he's kind of a famous dude off of the same one. And then the kicker is Leslie Pollard. So he's best known as being Fritz Pollard's older brother. And, I know, like, doing the research while he was at North Division, there were times when he wasn't eligible. So, he made, I don't know if he, one way or another, he had some eligibility issues, but nevertheless, he ends up going to Dartmouth in 1908. So it was a couple of years later. And I think that year he was the only black guy on the team. And he ended up, they had Jess Hawley was their star back, and he was a stud. He was an Olympic medalist by then. He was a shot putter. But anyways, Pollard ends up had a great game against Harvard. The story has a picture of him, running the ball against Harvard. But he only stayed 1 year. Again, don't know if it's financial, academic, whatever issues, but he was only there for the 1 year. And then he ends up working for the Urban League. He coached Lincoln University in Philadelphia for a couple of years, 1913, 14. And then he, unfortunately, he and his wife was like a nanny, and the baby that she was, nannying or babysitting for, all three of them were killed, and they were asphyxiated in that, the kid's apartment. So, So anyways, it's one of those, with him in particular, it's kind of what might have been. You look at the path that his brother took, and
Hmm.
Starring at Brown and in the renewal of the Rose Bowl in 1916, Brown versus Washington State, and then he ends up, he's in the NFL. He's the
Yeah, they could have teamed
coach.
up in the NFL or something if he survives. Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just crazy, crazy the amount of talent that was on that team, and yet like two of the most talented people that we know of, one dies in the war and another, died, 4 years even before that. So anyways, there's kind of tragedy and triumph,
Yeah.
in the same story.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean, it's great to dig into these. You're talking about a high school team, and who would thunk you're talking about some of these great athletes, from football yesteryear. And you do this a lot, and your stories really, spin you into some other realm that you weren't expecting to. That's what's so much fun about them. And maybe you could share with the listeners where they can take in your tidbits and enjoy some of this great football history.
Yeah, just go to footballarchaeology.com. It's a Substack site. So, just go there whenever you want, or subscribe, and you'll get an email every time that I publish a story. If you don't like emails, then just you can get the Substack app, and you'll get notified every time that that a new story comes around. So, either one of those will work. Whatever floats your boat.
No, Tim, that's some fantastic information and stories once again, as always. And we appreciate you, and we'd love to have you back again next week.
I'll do my best.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.